Here's a story based on the title, a broadcast of horror, executing a child and unleashing hell, HFY. The galaxy was watching. Every screen, every broadcast system, every holographic display across the universe had tuned into the transmission. The Zorith Empire, rulers of dozens of systems, known for their unyielding grip and cruel practices, was about to deliver a message, and they made sure no one could look away. The scene was grim, a stark metallic stage, cold and devoid of decoration, save for the crimson banner of the Empire draped behind. A child stood in the center, trembling but defiant. Her small frame was dwarfed by the imposing Zorith soldiers flanking her, their alien forms casting long, menacing shadows. She was no older than 10 Earth years, her messy hair framing a face that radiated courage despite the terror in her eyes. "This is what happens," the Zorith commander growled in a guttural voice, amplified by the broadcast, "to those who defy the Empire." The child, a human, represented the last survivors of a rebellion that had dared to challenge Zorith rule. Her parents, leaders of the insurgency, had already been executed. Now, the Zorith intended to make an example of their daughter. The universe held its breath as the commander raised a cruel, shimmering blade. The child's gaze darted to the camera, her lips parting as she shouted, "You will pay for this, humanity will rise." And then, the blade fell. The response was immediate. The humans of Earth, scattered across colonies and space stations, had long been underestimated, considered a fledgling race with limited resources. They were left unprotected when the Zorith Empire began its campaign of subjugation. The broadcast, intended to crush their spirit, achieved the opposite. Within hours, a unified response erupted. From every corner of the galaxy, human ships emerged from the void, frigates, cruisers, and unregistered vessels, many of them old and patched together, moved with a singular purpose. They weren't just soldiers, they were miners, farmers, engineers, scientists, united by rage. The humans had been holding back a secret. Buried deep within their colonies and hidden research facilities was a fleet of experimental weapons, including a new kind of energy cannon capable of piercing even the most advanced Zorith shielding. Decades of desperation and innovation had bred the kind of ingenuity that made humans dangerous when pushed to the brink. The first assault came within days. A lone human ship appeared on the edge of Zorith Prime's orbit. The Zorith, overconfident in their defenses, sent a single cruiser to intercept. That cruiser was reduced to glowing scrap in moments. It wasn't just firepower that made the humans a threat, it was their strategy. They didn't follow the expected patterns of galactic warfare. Guerrilla tactics, surprise assaults, and an unyielding will turned every skirmish into a nightmare for the Zorith. And then there were the whispers. The child's last words haunted the Empire. Reports of human infiltrators operating deep within Zorith-controlled territories began to spread. Stations exploded without warning, supply lines vanished, and fear took root among the Zorith ranks. Rumors circulated that the child's spirit had risen to guide her people, that she was watching, ensuring no human would falter. The humans called it Operation Retribution, but among the Zorith, it earned another name, the Gates of Hell. Entire Zorith fleets abandoned their posts, too afraid to face the relentless human forces. Colonized worlds rose up, inspired by humanity's defiance. In less than a year, the Zorith Empire crumbled. On the day humanity declared victory, they broadcast their own message. Standing on the ruins of the Zorith capital, a human soldier held a small, tattered photo of the child. Her face, now a symbol of resistance, was seen across the galaxy. "This," the soldier said, "is for her, and for every innocent life stolen. Let this be a warning. Humanity will endure, and we will never forget." The galaxy learned a harsh lesson that day. Humanity might be fragile, but when pushed, they are the fiercest defenders of justice, and those who dared to harm them would never escape the fire they unleashed. Let me know if you'd like to expand or adjust any part of the story. The victory of humanity over the Zorith Empire was celebrated across the galaxy, but the scars of the conflict ran deep. Millions of lives had been lost, and countless worlds left in ruins. Yet, amidst the destruction, humanity emerged stronger, united, and with a newfound purpose, to ensure such atrocities would never happen again. In the quiet aftermath of the war, whispers began to circulate about something darker. The child's execution had left an indelible mark on more than just the human psyche, it had torn open a wound in the fabric of existence itself. Reports from liberated Zorith colonies spoke of strange occurrences. Shadows moved where there was no light, entire patrols vanished without a trace, their last transmissions filled with static and whispers. Survivors described ghostly apparitions, glimpses of the executed child, her eyes burning with an otherworldly glow. At first, humanity dismissed these stories as trauma-induced hysteria. The war had left everyone on edge, and it wasn't uncommon for the mind to conjure horrors in times of stress. But then the incidents spread. Human ships, too, began reporting inexplicable events. Navigation systems failed near the site of key battles, and distress calls were intercepted, only to reveal garbled cries for help. The phenomenon came to a head when a Zorith refugee ship appeared in Earth's orbit. Its crew, once proud enforcers of the Empire, were found huddled in terror, their minds shattered. Over and over, they repeated the same phrase. "She's coming, the gates are open." Scientists, philosophers, and mystics convened to investigate the phenomenon. They pieced together a chilling theory: the child's unjust death, broadcast to billions, had created a psychic ripple, a wound in the collective consciousness of the galaxy. Humanity's fury, combined with the fear and despair of countless oppressed species, had formed a vortex of raw emotion, something the universe itself could not contain. This vortex, they theorized, had birthed a force of vengeance. It wasn't just the memory of the child, it was something far greater, a manifestation of the rage, grief, and desire for justice that had fueled the war. It moved through the void, targeting remnants of the Zorith and those complicit in their atrocities. Humanity had unleashed an entity they could neither understand nor control. The first direct encounter with this entity occurred on a remote research station orbiting a dead star. Scientists working on experimental weapons reported seeing a figure, a small girl, her body wreathed in flames, her voice echoing with the cries of the countless lives lost to the Zorith. "You did this," she said, "you called me." The station's crew was found days later, alive but forever changed. They described an overwhelming presence, neither malevolent nor benevolent, but relentless in its purpose. It had spared them, but its message was clear: it would not rest until every injustice was avenged. The galaxy began to fear this spectral force, now known as the Avenger. Some worshipped it, building shrines to the child they believed had become a divine instrument of retribution. Others sought ways to appease it, offering reparations to humanity and the other species the Zorith had oppressed. But humanity knew better. This was not a being to be placated or controlled. It was a reminder, a living, burning testament to the consequences of cruelty and the power of collective will. Years later, as humanity rebuilt and expanded, they carried the memory of the child and the Avenger with them. Her image adorned monuments, her story taught to every generation as a warning and a beacon. The galaxy, once fractured and rife with conflict, found a fragile unity in the aftermath, driven by the shared knowledge of what had been unleashed. The gates of hell had opened, but in their flames, a new hope was forged. Humanity had proved its strength, but they had also learned a vital truth: justice, once awakened, cannot be silenced. And in the farthest reaches of space, the Avenger watched, ensuring that the lesson was never forgotten. Decades passed, and the galaxy began to settle into an uneasy peace. The once feared Avenger became a whispered legend, its presence felt but not seen in years. Humanity had risen to prominence, their resilience and ingenuity earning them a seat at the head of a new galactic council. The lessons of the war, and the horrors that followed, shaped a new era of cooperation among species. But in the shadows, some whispered that the galaxy's peace was superficial, a fragile veneer over festering wounds. Among the former Zorith loyalists, resentment smoldered. They whispered of reclamation, of vengeance for their fallen empire, and in secret, they began to plot. On a distant moon at the edge of known space, a Zorith warlord named Kioran gathered the remnants of the Empire's fleet. Scarred and bitter, he refused to accept the galaxy's new order. For years, he had been amassing resources and weapons, scouring ancient ruins for anything that could give him an advantage. It was during one such expedition that his forces uncovered something extraordinary. Deep beneath the surface of a forgotten world, buried under layers of rock and time, they found a device. It was massive, its surface etched with runes that pulsed faintly with a sickly green light. The device seemed alive, thrumming with an energy unlike anything the Zorith had encountered before. Kioran's scientists, though terrified, deciphered its purpose. It was a relic from a long-extinct race, designed to harness and amplify psychic energy. Kioran saw it as his path to reclaiming the galaxy, but he underestimated what he had found. When the device was activated, the first sign of its power was a scream, a psychic wail that rippled across the galaxy, felt by every sentient being. It was a cry of anguish and rage, a sound that brought memories of the child's execution flooding back to the forefront of the collective consciousness. The Avenger had been dormant, its vengeance seemingly sated, but the activation of the relic was like pouring fuel on a dying ember. The Avenger returned. It appeared first at Kioran's stronghold, a fiery spectre more terrible than ever. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes resembling the child, other times a swirling maelstrom of light and shadow. The Zorith fleet opened fire, but their weapons passed through it as though it were smoke. The spectre tore through their ships with a fury unmatched, leaving nothing but molten wreckage in its wake. Kioran himself faced the Avenger in the heart of his fortress. The relic pulsed between them, its energy feeding the entity, making it stronger. Kioran fell to his knees as the spectre loomed over him. "You sought power," it said, its voice a thousand voices, "but you unleashed justice." With a final scream, Kioran and the relic were consumed in a blinding explosion of light, leaving behind nothing but a crater where the fortress once stood. The galaxy reeled from the event. The Avenger's return reignited fear among those who remembered its wrath, yet, its actions were not indiscriminate. Reports began to emerge of its sparing ships and colonies that had no ties to the Zorith, even protecting innocents caught in the crossfire of Kioran's rebellion. Humanity, now leaders of the Galactic Council, called for calm. They reminded the galaxy of the Avenger's purpose. It was not a monster, but a force of reckoning, bound by the collective will of those who demanded justice. "We created it," said Ambassador Rachel's son, addressing the council. "It is a reflection of our greatest pain and our deepest resolve. As long as we stand for justice, it will not turn against us, but if we falter, if we allow oppression and cruelty to fester again, it will remind us of the price." Over time, the galaxy began to adapt to the presence of the Avenger. Monuments were built not just to honor the child but to serve as reminders of the cost of tyranny. Entire civilizations pledged themselves to peace and fairness, fearing the return of the spectre should they stray from the path. And in the silent void between stars, the Avenger lingered. It watched and waited, not as a threat but as a guardian. The galaxy knew that it was both their creation and their responsibility. Justice had become eternal, and the flames of the Avenger would never be extinguished.